The train had gone, leaving only its echo behind, a trembling whistle dissolving into dusk. The station was quiet except for the wind brushing grit across the boards, and the voices of a few townsfolk drifting away like smoke. Lamps burned low, throwing thin halos onto the platform, and in one of those circles of light sat a woman wrapped in a dark shawl, her satchel pressed close against her knees. She was young still, but her grief had carved shadows beneath her eyes. Her name was Marisol Blackbird, and she waited as if for something that had already chosen not to arrive. She did not look up when the boots sounded, heavy, deliberate, each strike steady as a drumbeat. But others did. Faces turned, whispers pressed behind hands. A tall figure had appeared, broad as the horizon itself, his frame darkened against the fading sky. Elias Boone, the cattleman, the giant cowboy whose land stretched further than sight. He moved as if the air bent for him, as if silence itself were a cloak about his shoulders. When he stopped before Marisol, the boards creaked under his weight, and the station seemed to hold its breath. He studied her for only a heartbeat, but in that moment, his gaze settled into hers like a stone dropped into deep water. His voice came low, rough, yet certain. "You're coming with me." 4 words, nothing more. The lamps flickered. Marisol's fingers tightened on her satchel. The townfolk stirred, uncertain whether to laugh, to object, or to pretend they had not heard. She raised her chin, her voice quiet but sharp enough to cut. "I belong to no one." Elias did not answer with argument. He simply stood, broad shadow stretching across her seat, his stillness louder than noise. A muscle twitched in his jaw, but his eyes did not shift away. He seemed to have decided something long before he had spoken it. Around them, the gossip thickened, murmurs of widow, of shame, of Boone's folly. Marisol felt the heat of their judgment, the sting of being both pitied and despised. She wanted to rise, to leave, but her legs would not yet obey. Elias moved then, not toward her, but toward her satchel. He bent, lifted it as if it were his already, and slung it easily into his hand. Then he turned, his back to her, and walked toward the open street where his horse waited tethered. He did not look to see if she followed. He had placed the choice before her, and the choice burned like a brand. Marisol sat rigid. Pride told her to stay, to let him go and never bow her head. But pride did not fill the hollow of her stomach, nor shield her from the cold creeping in with night. And there had been something in his eyes, not pity, not command, but a steadiness that unsettled her because it felt like recognition. Slowly, she rose, shawl trailing behind her, and followed into the shadows. The ride to his land was long, the stars prickling awake one by one above them. Elias said little, and Marisol even less. The rhythm of hooves carried them through open prairie where grass whispered in endless waves, where coyotes called to one another across distance. When at last the ranch emerged, it did so like a dark ship run aground. Fences stretched pale in the moonlight, barns squatted against the earth, and the house stood tall, windows faint with lamplight, a silhouette of wealth surrounded by silence. Inside, the air smelled of pine wood and smoke, warm but lonely. Elias set her satchel down in a room at the back, a room with a window framing the wide night. He did not touch her again. Instead, he left a lantern lit, bread on the table, a quilt folded at the foot of the bed. His footsteps retreated down the hall, each one steady, each one carrying with it the question that remained between them. Marisol stood alone in the room, pressing fingers to the glass, watching stars shiver. She whispered her husband's name, asking if survival was betrayal, if choosing shelter meant forgetting the one she had buried. The silence gave no answer, only her own reflections staring back at her. Days began to stretch thin. Elias rose early, worked the cattle, spoke with his men. He did not demand she rise with him, yet he left food each morning without fail, a cup of coffee steaming when she woke. His presence was large, yet never forced upon her. He was a man of gestures, not declarations. When a draft whistled through the hall, he repaired the cracks before evening. When her shawl grew torn, a new one appeared folded neatly on a chair. He asked nothing in return. Marisol remained cautious. She moved like a bird that had known cages, suspicious of even an open door. Yet she began to notice Elias when he thought himself unseen. The way he stroked the muzzle of a restless horse, murmuring patience into its ear. The way he sat at night with a glass in hand but never drank deep, staring at the fire as if daring it to speak. The way loneliness clung to him even in his own kingdom of land. One evening, she heard herself humming, a song of her people, low and unmeant for others. She stopped, embarrassed, yet found Elias standing in the doorway. He did not speak. He only listened, as if the notes were something rare he feared to disturb. She looked away, cheeks warming. Something shifted then, small, fragile, but undeniable. But the world was not blind. The sheriff came by, his eyes sharp, his words sharper. "You'll ruin yourself, Boone. Folks won't abide it. A man with your land, your name, tying yourself to a widow from vanished blood? It's folly." His gaze slid to Marisol, cold with judgment, as though she were not there but a shadow clinging to Elias' house. Elias did not reply, only stood with arms folded, silence heavier than steel. Yet after the sheriff left, Marisol felt the weight of the words crushing her. She packed her things that night, trembling hands folding the shawl, her satchel once again by the door. She would not be the cause of a man's ruin. But Elias caught her there. His voice came quiet, rough with restraint. "If you walk away, it won't be their whispers you're sparing me from. It'll be the one thing I've ever wanted." She froze, satchel still in hand. His eyes burned with anger, but it was not anger for her. It was anger at the cruelty of the world that dared to measure worth by blood and name. Marisol's breath shook. She had no answer, only the pounding of her heart, the question rising like fire. Could she believe him? The storm broke before dawn. Lightning split the sky, rain slashed down, and the earth turned to mud beneath hooves. The cattle scattered, panicked cries tearing across the land. Elias ran into the torrent, shouting commands, mud clinging to his boot. Marisol followed without thought, shawl soaked, hair plastered to her face, driving the animals back with a fierceness that surprised even herself. They moved together in the chaos, two figures against the violence of nature, refusing to yield. By the time the herd was safe, they collapsed into the barn, breathless, clothes dripping, bodies trembling from exertion. For a long moment neither spoke. The storm howled outside, but within there was only the sound of their ragged breaths. Elias turned to her, rain glistening on his jaw, eyes searching. His voice came low, almost broken. "Don't leave me." It was not a command. It was a confession. Marisol's hand found his, fingers trembling. She did not speak of love. It was too soon, too fragile, but in the touch there was choice, and in the choice there was strength. For the first time, survival no longer felt like betrayal. It felt like living. When morning came, the land lay drenched but glistening, washed clean by the storm. Sunlight poured gold across the fields, and the air smelled of new earth. In town, whispers gathered like crows, expecting scandal. But when Elias and Marisol entered, they did so side by side, walking with quiet dignity. He introduced her not as guest nor burden, but as wife. Gasps rippled, judgments rose, but something in the sight of them, unbowed, unashamed, stilled the crowd. Back at the ranch, Marisol stood on the porch, shawl dry now, hair catching light. The horizon stretched endless before her. Elias joined, his hand brushing hers, neither speaking, because words were too small for what had been forged in storm and silence. And if you were there, if you were listening, you might hear what the land itself seemed to say, that dignity is not given, but taken, carried in small acts of courage, and guarded like a flame against the wind. Remember that, if you have ever felt unwanted. Remember that you, too, are never beyond the reach of grace.